Welcome live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you for tuning in. You, of course, are watching The Week Ahead. I am Liesl Wilson, your host for today. Let's take a look at your headlines. Well, South African Civil Aviation Authority extends the precautionary suspension of ComAir operations indefinitely. In news further afield, Ukrainians are fleeing from their homes to towns, still holding out against the Russian invasion. On the sporting front, Mamelodi Sundowns extend their lead in Group A of the CAF Champions League to 6 points. It comes after a 1-0 win over Egyptian giants Al Ahly. All right, those will look at your headlines. Some of the top stories we can look forward to in the week ahead. Let's start off with the flights of aviation company ComAir, which have now been suspended indefinitely. It follows the 24-hour precautionary suspension of the company's air operator certificate privileges on Saturday. The South African Civil Aviation Authority says the suspension stays for 24 hours pending the operator addressing all safety and risk findings as communicated by the regulator on Saturday morning. The suspension follows the visit by the SACAA to the operator to investigate and determine the cause of a spate of occurrences affecting a concerning number of flights operated by both Kulula.com and BA ComAir. Moving on to other news, the Anti-Racism Network South Africa has launched the 7th Anti-Racism Week campaign at Sharpeville in honor of those who lost their lives during the protest against the past laws that led to a massacre. Now, the Action Week, coinciding with Human Rights Month, aims to create public awareness about racism. But perhaps to unpack this and more, we are now joined by the Executive Director of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, Nishan Balton. Nishan, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC today.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us.
Nishan, South Africa has witnessed the erosion of overt and legally endorsed racial hierarchy and perhaps also seen the consequences thereof. We see that issues of inequality and class also come to the fore. So with the future of South Africa and the success of South Africa's democracy depending on the development of harmonious race relations and understanding the factors that underlie the country's interracial attitudes remain important. And I wonder if you can unpack what we are witnessing regarding some of these factors in a contemporary South Africa today.
Well, we're seeing work that's very positive. Just give me. I'm talking to you right here from Sharpeville itself, in the museum. So there is a bit of noise. Whilst we have seen the issues of racism in schools like Randfontein, we are also witnessing, at a very small scale, but in communities like Senekal and others, people coming together across race to begin to fix up towns and cities. So you'll find people across race fixing up potholes. But and that's because there is leadership at a local level that has come to a common realization that there is more that people have in common than what they have in difference. In other areas, like Randfontein, my sense is that there was weak leadership in the school, there's weak leadership within the community possibly, and nobody with the ability to bring people together to talk through, to find solutions.
All right, Nishan.
All of this,
sorry, do continue, Nishan.
One of the most positive developments in the last 2 years is that we finally have a national action plan to combat racism finalized by Cabinet after the 2001 World Conference Against Racism, and work that's now being done to ensure that there is a possibility of a more coherent and comprehensive response from all sectors in society to deal with this issue.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you've spoken about, both the positive and negative aspects that come with that, because we have to admit that strides have been taken, but obviously more work needs to be done. And I think just in analyzing South Africa today, perhaps what we've seen last year during the July unrest, amongst other isolated incidences, including the issues of racism in schools and other institutions, I wonder how it begins to explain the impact of post-traumatic stress disorder and some of the historical and intergenerational trauma due to racism that we have faced as a country, that we are witnessing in South Africa, given some of the strides that have been taken?
I think it's deep.
Yeah.
And it comes to the fore every time there is a public issue of racism, which I think rekindles all kinds of memories for people across the board. But I also think that there are many institutions, there's the Healing Hands and others in different parts of the country that have been bringing people together to talk about these issues and about the pain of the past, but also beginning to find the ways forward. And there is no other way besides getting people to talk in honest and frank dialogue about these issues, but dialogue that must lead to action, dialogue that must lead to cooperation, joint endeavors to begin to grapple with the solutions, because racism has so many different facets that it requires multiple solutions to deal with the multiple issues that I think people face today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the issue of white supremacy also comes to the fore when you look at how it's part of the structure of a contemporary South Africa, and whilst we grapple with issues of identity at large. And I wonder, while race is obviously also recognized as a social construct rather than a biological fact, there are some competing assumptions about what race means, for our everyday interactions, and perhaps some of the solutions and conscientizing that is needed. I wonder if you could perhaps speak to, people of color who, having faced years of systemic racism and microaggressions, as we look at the launch today and some of the other initiatives that have been put in place, how do you think all of this aims to begin to foster social cohesion and undo those legacies? How do we begin to dismantle them?
Well, today, if I take today as an example, we got over 200 young people together at the gravesite of the victims of the massacre in Sharpeville. There they stood to honor those who've died, but to make a commitment to understand in greater detail why this happened and what of the past continues into our present today. Included in our delegation today was a group of white Afrikaners called the Group of 10, who last year issued out a statement objecting to F.W. de Klerk's lack of apology for apartheid, or his attempt to in fact, deny that it was a crime against humanity. And we got them to engage with the audience today to re-offer their apology and to speak at length about what that apology meant. And whilst there wasn't great depth, because the time and the venue didn't allow for it, I think it's the areas around which indicates that there are possibilities of real deep dialogue and conversation amongst the people who actually need to be having it. And I think in there are possible solutions. The power of government to institute policies and programs, however, is the biggest weak link in our fight against racism today, which is why we are happy that there is a plan. That plan now needs to be operationalized and needs to be resourced so that I think the fight against racism becomes much more comprehensive and embedded in all institutions across this country.
Well, you speak about policies and instituting change at large. I also want to look at the issue of language and understanding some of the semantic differences that are used and observed in South Africa. When we look at attitudes of Black Africans towards white Africans and other races and how they interact. I mean, how important is language and narratives in racial analysis, but also dealing with unconscious biases?
Well, I'm not too much of a linguist and a student of language. But I think when we begin to use language to other people, as is possibly being done in the current wave of xenophobia in this country, where people are being asked to speak in a particular language, and if they can't, they are then deemed to be foreigners in South Africa, or if the accent is not what somebody suspects as being of that of South African, they are being othered. And more than being othered, they are being forced out of homes, out of businesses, with the intention of wanting to force them out of the country. So language can be a powerful force to get people together, but it can also have very divisive effects if used by people who have intentions to further divisions and cause conflict and harm.
Absolutely. And then just as we speak to the issue of policy and change, Nishan, as we conclude this conversation, I know that the program is still running on your end. Obviously, we're looking at the structural effects that inequality and discrimination has had, and perhaps how it's also been racialized over the years. I wonder, as we begin to look at ways ahead, and foster this idea of social cohesion going forward, what do you think we as South Africans individually need to begin to do, perhaps before we also look at our collective efforts going forward?
Well, we use a very simple formula. That, in fact, people need to start off by learning about racism. Don't assume that we know about it. I think all of us in the foundation are on a daily journey to understand this, to understand our history, which is why we are here in Sharpeville as well. So from learning about it, we need to begin to understand it. Then we need to figure out what are the points that it impacts on our lives, where our internal prejudices are, and how we confront those. Within our homes and within our families and within our social circles. We would need to then extend that into wider society, where I think the need to look at policies within institutions, to look at practices within institutions. And beyond that, we need to look at what kinds of actions are required. What has come to the fore in the last few years here is the usage of the Equality Court as a key medium through which we can get people taken to for transgressing issues of race and racism in this country. But I think more people need to use that as an institution. More people need to use the Human Rights Commission and other institutions to, in fact, hold those whom they think have harmed them racially, to let the courts begin to deal with some of those processes. But I think there are also big campaigns we need to do at the societal level. And the most important and most immediate campaign that all of society needs to deal with is the rising xenophobia in this country. And I'm very happy that there are many civil society organizations who are going to take action on the 21st of March, Human Rights Day, to highlight that xenophobia denies people of the human rights in this country and goes against the grain of our constitution and would need to be combated. So that's the last point that we deal with. Once you've learned about it, once you've dealt with all of that, it ultimately must result in some kind of action as an individual, as an institution, and lastly, as a country. And the road towards becoming an anti-racist country is long, but I think there is significant work being done. It just needs to be scaled up and must bring in millions of South Africans behind it.
Nishan Bolton, thank you very much for your time. Again, Executive Director of the Ahmed Kathaja Foundation, Nishan Bolton, chatting about the Anti-Racism Network South Africa, which has launched the 7th Anti-Racism Week campaign, which is being held in Sharpeville in honor of those who lost their lives during the protest against the past laws that, of course, led to the massacre. This Action Week coincides with Human Rights Month, aimed at creating public awareness about racism at large. We'll leave the conversation there. Continue on the other side with more news and updates. You're watching The Week Ahead. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Week Ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. More news at this hour. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases has reported 1,571 new COVID-19 infections in the country. One person has died in the last 24-hour to 48-hour period, and it takes the death toll now to 99,712, active cases standing at 20,351. On the news, motorists whose driver's licenses have expired could have their insurance claims dismissed if they are involved in a car accident. The Department of Transport has reiterated that the 31st of March 2022 deadline for drivers to renew their licenses will not be extended.
The Department of Transport has revealed that there's about 500,000 driving licenses that are currently due for renewal. Motorists whose driver's license expired during the hard lockdown were given a grace period to drive without a driver's license. The Transport Department launched an online service for the renewal of driver's licenses and vehicle licenses last month. But this system has been experiencing teething problems, making it difficult for motorists to book appointments online. A number of licensing centres across Johannesburg have also been shut down due to ongoing protest action. Some insurance companies have offered a grace period to their customers who are battling to renew their licenses.
If you haven't been given that grace period by your insurer, then you are at risk of having your claim rejected at claim stage. However, most insurers will give policyholders the benefit of the doubt if they don't offer that grace period to their policyholders. In that maybe they'll have a lighter condition to say, if you can just prove to us that you did apply for a new driver's license, then we will agree to honor your claim and pay out for any damage that you might have incurred as a result of the accident.
Experts say that drivers who are involved in a car accident will have to prove that they've had a valid driver's license previously and that they have applied for license renewal.
Policyholders can either provide proof of their booking. So typically when you do make your booking online, you do receive an SMS just confirming the booking time that you have made online. And in some cases that will suffice. In other cases, if you have a temporary driver's license, for example, you may be able to say, well, yes, I had applied, I do have a temporary driver's license, and your insurer will honor your claim, even though your new driver's license has not arrived. So insurers have had to be a little bit more flexible in how they determine what is proof enough, and most insurers have been quite lenient.
Motorists are urged to verify with the insurance companies about their insurance position regarding this matter. This is primarily because insurance companies are under no obligation to offer their customers a grace period for driving without a driver's license. Naledi Matlapeng, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Another heated debate over the removal of colonial statues and renaming of apartheid street names in the surroundings of Bloemfontein continues. Residents have expressed mixed reactions, saying that history should be preserved, while others view statues as symbols of history. Now, the Mangaung Metro Municipality says they are still engaging with stakeholders to start with public participation. Take a look.
Bloemfontein holds apartheid history. Pressbrand Street is where most of the statues are located. The imposing figure of, say, Johannes Hendrikus Brand is amongst others. Brand was the fourth state president of the erstwhile Orange Free State. The Brand Street is also the home to the iconic Supreme Court of Appeal. Across is the statue of Christian Rudolph de Wet at the Free State Legislature, known as Fourth Ratsal. These historical landmarks stir mixed reactions.
It's small things like the statues that actually show us that we are in a democratic time. It's these statues that remind us about the suffering of our parents. And I feel like since while they're still here, new ones should be here. New ones that represent liberation.
I'm not that concerned about it because statues is something about the past. It's personally they must remove everything and let there be no statues.
I don't see any problem with the statues where they are. I don't see what is the reason, why are they removing them? How are the statues disturbing them?
Government has started renaming main streets using the names of freedom fighters. Charlotte Maxeke Street is found in the busy central business district. Nelson Mandela connects to the University of the Free State, and Raymond Mhlaba leads to the N1 stretch. The municipality says the committee responsible for the renaming project is receiving submissions.
Last year there was work that has happened, but it was not a whole lot of work. We are encouraging people to continue doing submissions, but the process is continuous because other than the existing public places and your normal residential, you still have developments that are taking place in the city that would demand for us that we go out and make sure that those places are named.
The city's tourist attraction is the statue of former President Nelson Mandela, situated at Neville Hill. Aphumelele Mdlalane, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
Right, on to international news now. Ukrainians are fleeing from their homes to towns still holding out against the Russian invasion. People have traveled to the Ukrainian-held town in cars and backs of vans with children and pets on their laps. Ukraine yesterday accused Russian forces of killing 7 civilians in an attack on women and children trying to flee Fighting rather near Kiev, Russian ground forces are 25 kilometers from the center of the capital, which Russia could attack within days. The cities of Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy and Mariupol remain encircled under heavy Russian shelling, where the Russian bombardment has trapped thousands of people in besieged cities and sent 2.5 million Ukrainians fleeing to neighboring countries. The images emerging from the Ukraine are especially stark and painful as large groups of women are shown huddled with their children and babies waiting for assistance. Women and children are fleeing with their belongings whilst their partners stay behind to fight. Fear mixed with tears brimming in red-rimmed eyes have been beamed to world media.
The devastating scenes are a reminder of the particular impacts of war and conflict on women and girls, not just in Ukraine, but around the world. Even before Russia's attack on Ukraine, the number of forcibly displaced people worldwide has been growing at an alarming rate. The current war on Ukrainian soil has been described by some observers as the largest movement of refugees in Europe since the Second World War. In 2010, 1 in 159 people in the world were forcibly displaced. In 2020, the number was 1 in 95, nearly 1% of the world's population, representing over 82 million people. Women and girls make up half the world's displaced people, categorized as refugees, those who are stateless, or those who are internally displaced. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, women who are unaccompanied, pregnant, disabled or elderly, and those who remain as heads of households are even more vulnerable. Yet, women and girls have historically received little targeted support or assistance. According to an analysis by UN Women from 2014, only 4% of the UN's interagency efforts to address humanitarian crises were aimed toward this group. This despite ample evidence that gender inequalities are exacerbated during times of crises. Fast forward to today, as the world continues to struggle with the fallout of a global pandemic. The situation is far from improved.
And staying with the Ukraine-Russian conflict, Parliament will debate the Ukraine-Russia conflict this coming Tuesday. The Democratic Alliance tabled the motion for the debate, where the conflict in the Ukraine has been raging for weeks, with hundreds of people, of course, being killed. Our Finance Minister, Godongwana, told Parliament during the adoption of the budget that the conflict would have an impact on the economy. Godongwana was also raising concerns that it would lead to rising oil prices after Russia was slapped with sanctions by the West. That is it from us here on the week ahead. Team will obviously be back next week for a look at the week in review. But from myself, Liesl Wilson, and the team, until next time, do take care. Have a blessed week. I'll see you soon.